Good morning to you. How you doing? It's not so rainy now, by the way. I might have thought about that when I put the title on the video a little earlier on when it was raining. How you doing? It's the 20th of November, by the way. It's exactly 10 o'clock in the morning as I chat with you now, and I hope this finds you well. It's clearing up nicely, actually. It's very cold today, very chilly and very wintry today here in Manchester. Anyway, good morning. I see there's quite a few messages there on the right-hand side of the page. I might get to some of them in a few minutes. There's just a few things that I want to do before we do anything else. And I'll explain why I've got this holding image on the video. The workers united will never be defeated. I had a very interesting email from a lady in New South Wales in Australia that I was going to read out on last night's program and talk about. But what happened yesterday was very late in the afternoon, a guest let me down. And because I was out all day yesterday, I didn't have a lot of time to put any content together in terms of just me presenting by myself, which I don't mind ordinarily. So what I've done this week is it's Tuesday to Friday instead of Monday to Thursday. There will be a 90-minute program, possibly a 2-hour program, but at least 90 minutes on Friday afternoon to make up for last night. Something I always do, by the way. I know it annoys people sometimes when you like a program and you're ready for it to come on and then it doesn't come on and it inconveniences you. But you have to remember, this is not any ordinary program. There isn't any production team or editors or anything like that. Sometimes changes have to be made at the last minute, and that's just the way it goes. And I always endeavor to do an extra program anyway. I mean, pretty much 95% of the year, it's Monday to Thursday and Sunday mornings, but occasionally something happens and it has to be changed, and you just have to roll with the punches, right? It is the alternative media at the end of the day. It isn't the mainstream media. So I can't just get somebody to jump in. And one of the things I don't like doing, I don't like putting people on air just for the sake of filling a gap. I've never done that, either as a commercial producer or as a commercial presenter. I won't ever do that. I won't just put on any old show for the sake of putting a show on. Anyway, a little word on today's program. Paul Craig Roberts is back. You know, Paul's a regular, former U.S. Assistant Treasury Secretary, Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. That's right. It's better to say it like that. Paul joins me. But I'm going to be speaking with Eric Karlstrom in the second hour. Some of you know a lot about Eric Karlstrom. He's going to join me in hour 2 today, and he's going to talk about these California fires. You know, I've mentioned a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, well, namely, first of all, that Paul Craig Roberts, who's a politician and an author and a writer and a very straight shooter, Paul, very honest guy, Paul, very pragmatic guy. He's been asking questions among his peer group, really, if I can consider myself a peer of Paul Craig Roberts. That's Jazzy over there playing with a toy. I did mention this, didn't I, on the show, that Paul's been asking questions about some of the photographs coming out of parts of California where these wildfires have been raging. So Eric Karlstrom, sit down there again. Eric Karlstrom is going to be talking about that in the second hour. It's a pretty packed show tonight, and I'm looking forward to that. Couple of things I want to just mention about next year. Things sometimes do move a bit slowly in terms of the kind of evolution of this program. But I've mentioned a couple of times that I'm not unaware of the fact that there are people who like video content. Now, I present a radio show and I sometimes do a live stream, but I'm a radio presenter and producer. I have done, obviously a bit of TV and I like it, but it's very production heavy and it's very time consuming. But a number of you have been asking me over the years, regularly asking me, what about, can we watch the radio shows that's going on? Now, I think this is, look, it doesn't matter what I think. I can't be deaf. My ears can't be deaf to the fact that people are asking these questions. So Hayden Hewitt is going to work with me very, very, very early in the new year to make it happen that the live radio show can go out as usual and you can hear it through the usual channels, but that if you wanted to click on, it's not a webcam, something a bit above webcam grade. If you want to watch it while it's going on, though I have no idea why you'd want to do that, because it's just me sitting here like this, basically, in the studio. But we're going to do that. But also in the new year, I'm going to bring you a new feature. I'm going to, at this time of the day, I'm going to be looking at the daily newspapers for about 20, 25 minutes. Now, it might sound like I'm going to be burdening myself with an awful lot of extra work. No, I'm not. I'm not going to do that. I had a big scare in August, and I'm not going to be burdening myself with an awful lot of extra work. The daily radio show and the Sunday show takes up a ridiculous amount of time. I'm not going to be adding too much more. But what I'm going to be doing in the new year is I'm going to be able to read the morning newspapers, and you'll be able to see the newspapers on screen, you know, kind of like what I used to do with Hayden at BVTV. And I'll do that every weekday morning, where we'll just have a look at the newspapers and we'll have a chat about them. All right. So that's all new stuff coming in the new year. I like to evolve, you know, I like to do stuff. I've always liked to change things up a bit every year and a half, every 18 months, 2 years. Just what I like to do anyway. So a couple of questions I always get asked. I'm actually going to have a look at the newspapers now, by the way. I'm going to have a look at the front pages of today's newspapers in a minute. One or two interesting things on there today. One or two questions I always get asked, and I don't answer them because I get asked them through Twitter, and I just don't have the time to be answering these questions. Not that it's not because I'm anybody special that I can't be answering your questions, but they're questions I just can't get into. I'm often asked about programs made by other people. What do you think of this program, Richie? What do you think of that program? The absolute honest to God truth is, I don't have time to listen to much content in the independent media. Not as much time as I'd like to have to listen to content. And I don't really have an opinion or want to be expressing opinions on what other people are doing. Once or twice in the last 2 years, I fired a shot across the bows of one or two other independent content creators when I felt that they've been disingenuous in terms of certain information that they've presented, or when they've downright lied about information. And I've had a pop. Fair enough. That's the way it is. If you're going to put content out there, you better be prepared for people to criticize it, critique it, or have a pop. But in general, I don't comment on, nor do I want to comment on, what other people are doing. On the topic of the independent media, let me just say this. This is where I am, and this is where I've always been. Today, because of social media, because of the ability to do this, because of the ability to press record on YouTube and go live, there are hundreds of thousands of independent content creators making daily vlogs, is that what they're called? Hundreds and hundreds of thousands. So the independent media is thriving in that sense, in terms of how much of it there is, right? There's a lot of it. Now, the alternative media, there isn't much of an alternative media. And this is where sometimes I wind people up and they feel that I'm having a go at Mr. X or Mrs. Y, when I'm not having a go at anybody. 99.999999% of independent media is not alternative at all. It's mainstream light, because it is presenting from the right or from the left. It operates in a world where it supports left-wing or right-wing people or points of view, making it mainstream light. It isn't alternative. There isn't anything alternative about the central theme or the central message running through it. There is a thriving and vast independent media, but there is little or no alternative media out there. And by alternative, I mean what I've said 1,000 times before, operating outside of that space, that space where you support socialist candidates, liberal candidates, all allegedly socialist and liberal candidates, or alternative or alt-right candidates, or conservative candidates or far-right candidates. That's what the independent media does. It props up the system, the establishment, just as much as the mainstream media. It really does. And it doesn't mean that the people who make this independent media are bad people or they're shills. They're not. But there's nothing alternative about their content. Nothing. I can say in this country, and I'll get called all sorts of names for it, and I don't care really. Call me arrogant if you want. The only alternative program, radio program, the only alternative daily radio program in this country is our program. The program that I present and that you support. It's the only one. Everything else is supporting the system, right? Or is urging its audience to engage with the system by choosing candidate A or candidate B. Doesn't make them bad people. But that's mainstream light. It's not alternative, right? All right. Get off your soapbox, you baldy bastard. Hi to Graham Booth, by the way. Top man, Graham Booth. Check out Game Face and check out Trigger Warning .tv, where Graham presents the brilliant Trigger Warning with Hayden Hewitt, which is a terrific take on current events and other stuff as well. Graham Booth, top man, who's only a couple hundred meters down the road from where I am right now, ironically. Anyway, okay, quick look at today's papers then. Because it's a very interesting one. Got a little tablet here, so I'm able to look at the papers. In the future, you'll be able to see the papers and one or two other things, and I'll be able to play a couple of video clips. Like I said, in the new year, what I'm doing now will become a regular 20-minute thing in the mornings. 20 minutes, mind. It won't get in the way of the radio program, which will broadcast live at 5 o'clock every day. And for those who've been listening for ages and who genuinely worry, because I had a bad run of it in August, I had a very bad time of it, it's not going to fuck my health up at all. It's very easy. Got all the papers here. It's no big deal. And I'm happy to do it anyway. Right, okay. A couple of things in the papers. All the UK TV and radio news programs are covering this story today. Front page of the Daily Express. Police chief blasts our broken society. Can you see that? Can you? You can't, can you? Police chief blasts broken society. This is about, by the way, this is not that sexy. There'll be people going now, look at the tablet he's got. This is a Samsung Galaxy Tab A from 2016. They retail at £149. All right. I got a present of it. Or in case you think it's an iPad or something sexy like that, it isn't. But anyway, there's always people saying stuff. Police chief blasts our broken society. This is on the front page of the Daily Mail as well. Police, we may have to let violent thugs go. This is a video, which is fairly distressing. Everybody is all over it, of a policewoman being attacked by a load of thugs. Chilling footage has emerged when a female police officer narrowly escaped being crushed by a double-decker bus in South London after a thug sent her flying into the middle of the road with a kung fu style kick. A viral video went on Twitter on Sunday, so it's a couple of days ago. It was supposed to be a routine traffic stop by two officers, and it escalated into a vicious assault. What's really grabbing people's imagination this morning is the fact that nobody came to the assistance of the police officer and the police officers, that there were a lot of bystanders who didn't get involved, who just watched it. And worse again, there was a guy who filmed it and then put it on Twitter, but didn't get involved. Oh, you're a big tough guy, are you, Richie? I hear you say. I'm not saying that. I understand why people wouldn't get involved, especially when the media is awash with stories of people carrying knives and bloody zombie knives and dangerous stuff. So I'm not blaming people on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's a policewoman getting beaten up by thugs and people just stand around and don't do anything about it. But worse again is the arsehole who films it. And I've talked a lot about that. What's happening to us? What's happening to us as people? That you think it's funny to film that, offer a running commentary on it while somebody is being assaulted. by an absolute lunatic. Anyway, right? The video is online. You can see the video anywhere. Let me go back to the papers there. So that's in the Express and the Daily Mail today. The Daily Telegraph is all about Brexit. Brexiteers, plotters failed to light the fuse. There it is there. You see that? That's basically about the failure, allegedly, of the European Research Group, the ERG, and the hardline Brexiteers, their failure to secure 48 letters of no confidence, which would trigger a no confidence vote in Theresa May. Some of them, including Crispin Blunt, have been pretty bullish this morning, saying that the no confidence vote against Theresa May, or the letters needed to secure that, are still probably imminent, and that in the next day or so they will have reached the threshold, and that there will be a no confidence motion put forward where Conservative MPs will then get to vote on whether they want to continue with Theresa May as leader. We're not going anywhere. I've said this a million times. Brexit ain't happening. And I've explained why I believe that to be why as well. Britain pushes for truce in Yemen war is on the Telegraph as well. Jeremy Hunt was in Iran yesterday on the business of trying to persuade the Iranians to allow that British woman to go free, whose name escapes me right now. It's probably in there. This is the woman the Iranians have accused of spying. Hunt was over there, and he did Hunt about needing to, quickly bring some sort of solution to Yemen. Jeremy Hunt. Stop sending guns to the Saudis then! And bombs, and planes, and military officers, and drones, maybe. As a starting point, maybe, just maybe, might be a way to help those in Yemen. The Guardian, plot to risk May risks appalling chaos in UK. Can you see that? You can't. Tory rebels warned. There's also a story about the taxi driver who was convicted of basically raping his passengers, John Warboys, who was due for parole. There was a big hoo-ha about that. Looks like he won't be paroled. The I newspaper, Brexit limbo may last for another 4 years, and so on, so on, so on. Daily Mirror, Gaza on sex assault charge. England footballer Paul Gascoigne is alleged to have assaulted a woman on a train back in the summer, and he says that he didn't, that he gave her a peck. I like Gaza. I hope he didn't do that, and I hope that was a misunderstanding. Battling the booze is Gaza. On the Times, Boots travel insurer faces investigation over debts. That's a report on doctors who work for an insurance company connected to Boots. They're being investigated by the General Medical Council. They're being accused of denying suitable care to policyholders, basically leaving you high and dry overseas, right? Read the fine print when you take out travel insurance before you pay these arseholes. The Financial Times, a story about Nissan. The Sun, John Warboys, there you go. John Warboys, the parole board has ruled that he, who was jailed in 2009 for assaults on 12 women, shouldn't be released and must remain behind bars. And of course, you won't be surprised to learn that the newspapers are full of Brexit stuff today, which does properly cheese off many of our listeners, particularly those listeners outside the UK. Right? Where are we? Right, I just want to read something I got yesterday. There's Hayden Hewitt there now, be Jesus there. I see Hayden is in as well. Watch your P's and Q's. I've already given a plug for it, but let me give a huge plug for it again. Trigger Warning TV with Hayden Hewitt even, and Graham, to find out all there is to know about the show, when it airs, what time. Thursday nights, Tuesday nights, Thursday nights. When they're on every night, the guys. Go to triggerwarning.tv, download the Cogent Radio app, and you'll find out all you need to know if you haven't watched that show already. It's very good. Now, I had an email yesterday, and I was going to get into this last night on the program. I was all geared up for yesterday's program, by the way, but I've explained why I wasn't on. This is from a woman called Julie Kearns. Now, she's in New South Wales, 30 years in Australia, so presumably late 80s, 87, 88. She ended up in Australia. She's a UK expat. I'm not going to read all of it, right? I'm going to read you a little smidgen of it, just this segment, because I found it very interesting. Again, it goes back to talking about what constitutes the independent media, what is the alternative media. Again, just to repeat what I said earlier on, it's in no way a criticism of anybody in this country or anywhere else. But 99.999% of the hundreds of thousands of independent content creators' work is mainstream light. It isn't alternative. Because the central starting point is, well, I'm on the left, vote Sanders, vote Corbyn, vote whoever, or I'm on the right. You should support Trump. You should support blah, 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 blah. That's where it is. The alternative, which rejects that, which looks at more esoteric explanations for things sometimes, or is prepared to countenance them anyway. That's alternative. There's very little of that. That's the point I was making. Anyway, Julie Kearns, 30 years in Oz. This is very interesting. I'm going to read you. This email was about 5 pages long, so I've taken a couple of paragraphs out of it. She gave me permission to do so and to name her. It's been a very difficult time accepting the reality that democracy is an illusion. It's been very painful, actually, Richie. As a Labour member back home in the UK in the 80s, I canvassed for my local MP, and I also worked very hard during the local elections. I really believed that we were good. We, the party of the people, the Socialist Party, the party of the unions, and that we were righteous while the Tories were cruel, callous, the party of the wealthy, and that Thatcher was evil, etc. Let me just scroll down. Julie writes, I believed it all. I even believed it during the Blair years, I'm ashamed to say. And afterwards. That's identity politics for you, as you often talk about on your radio program. Tony Blair, Richie, along with murdering millions of people, had just continued Thatcher's policies. I was thrilled when Corbyn was elected Labour leader, like millions more, I expect. I even met him a few times back in the 80s. He spoke out for the Palestinians. He spoke out against Zionism. And he, as you mentioned yesterday, Richie, like all real socialists, was warning about the European Union and where it would lead. That was then, writes Julie. This is Julie now. She continues. Anyway, having discovered alternative sources of information, I began to look at democracy and finance, and the reality hit home pretty hard. It wasn't easy for me. I've often heard you ask some of your contributors to explain how they felt when it dawned on them that something was very wrong. That's a great question, Richie. It nearly drove me to distraction, to be honest. I can't find the appropriate words to describe the feeling of helplessness, sheer helplessness. What's worse, though, is when you start to contemplate the alternative. That's what gets to people. Maybe more people than you think, let me read that again. Maybe more people than you think know the real truth. Maybe more people than you think know the real truth. But for them, the cure is maybe worse than the disease, if you know what I mean, Richie. My fear is of the vacuum left if we all reject politics, politicians, and banks. What would fill the void, Richie? Would it be anarchy? Would it be survival of the fittest? That's terrifying to me. Would there be law and order? How would things run? Asks Julie. And then she doesn't finish with, but I'm going to leave it here. She says, you don't have the answers, do you, Richie? Be honest. Of course I don't have the answers. Of course I don't. I have no answers for that. I've often used moments like that to talk about non-violent civil disobedience. But I've been aware enough while saying that, just how far away we are from large numbers of us coming together to stop doing what it is that the system has us do. We are maybe light years away from that mental space, from that level of consciousness. So I don't have the answers in the interim period. No, I don't. And I understand why when people talk about rejecting the system, the establishment, not engaging with it, pointing out that it is fraudulent to its very core, and that you don't have a cat in hell chance, I should say, of changing anything by exercising your right to vote every 4 years or 5 years or whatever it is. And I'm not going to get into all that. I've said it too many times. What's the alternative? In the short term, I don't know what the alternative is. And I absolutely understand why people are terrified of, a Mad Max type future where the strongest survive and, the biggest and the hardest and the meanest and the most sick and the most evil thrive while everybody else is hiding in fear of their lives. That's what people think, you see. When they think, well, this is a rotten paradigm. We can't ever change things through it. But what's the alternative? That's what Julie was saying quite clearly in her email to me. And I don't have the immediate answer. The long-term answer is people refusing to engage with the system. But that takes a lot of numbers, It takes a lot of numbers. It's no good. I'm on a street here, a residential street. It's no good one person saying, no, I'm not complying anymore. I'm not paying your taxation. I'm not doing it. And the reason I'm not doing it is because you are a criminal gang of tyrants. So I'm not engaging with that. It's no good one guy doing that or one woman doing that, while the rest of his neighbours are oblivious to it, blissfully unaware that he's even doing it. Now, if the entire street and the street next to it and the cul-de-sac just over there, if they all do it, that's a beginning. But we measure our self-worth now and our worth in terms of what we have, don't we? Let's be honest about it. This is selfish individualism. We measure where we are in the world. We measure our place in society and in the world in terms of what do I have? But even worse, what do I have that my next door neighbor doesn't have? You can call it materialism. You can give it any label you want. Selfish individualism. We weren't always like that. What happened in the last 200 years to make people like people are now, where they will film a policewoman getting the shit kicked out of her by a fucking scumbag and think about putting it on YouTube while giving a running commentary to it. That is where we are now. I like to believe that sometime in our past, we cooperated with one another. We worked with one another. We cared about one another. And we coexisted outside of where we are now, which is what do I have that my neighbour doesn't have? Because that's all that matters, really. Got to change the car this year. He changed it. Got to change the car this year. Can't have people thinking that he's better than I am. What point in the last 200 years did we reach this point? I don't know is the answer. I like to think that there was a time in history, in hidden history, a time where we were better than that, where we were on a much higher conscious plane than that. It's like I get asked all the time, Richie, why do you talk about the workers owning the means of production? You're just a crazy Marxist bastard, Richie. You're just a socialist. You just want to take money away from people who earned it. No. These labels, Marxist, socialist, have been introduced to human thinking, to human consciousness, by people who want to make us forget what we used to be, maybe. I don't know. Maybe we used to be like that. But also what we're capable of if we reject, as the brilliant John Perkins calls, the death economy, right? Mortgaging yourself up to the tits. Buying the latest Mercedes E-Class car on the never, never. On hire purchase. Loading yourself with debt to massage your ego or to satisfy your need for a certain type of self-esteem. I'm not knocking Marx, by the way. I'm not knocking Marx or anybody else. I'm saying these words have been used to demonize an ideology. The ideology is, or the ideology that there is enough resources on planet Earth, resources that could be used sustainably for every single fucking one of us to not have to go and drive 3 hours in the morning in rush hour traffic, full of fucking rage, 60, 70 hours a week and barely be able to make it from month to month. There is enough on planet Earth, enough for everybody to have somewhere to live, to have enough to eat, to have heat and to have light, right? It's as simple as that. Socialism has only ever been tried properly in history, maybe in a couple of countries. Most recently, of course, in Venezuela. Don't believe the Western media and its lies about the Bolivar ideology. Don't believe the Western media lies about Hugo Chavez and what he was doing in Venezuela. It can work. I love the idea of co-ops. I can't remember whether it was Michael Moore, and I don't like Michael Moore. Don't start shouting at me. Don't shout at me if I'm wrong about Michael Moore. But there was a Hollywood documentary. It might have been Moore. It might have been somewhere else where I think it was Moore, because they featured a firm in Flint, a bakery firm, a co-op run with 40 or 50 employees all working together. Everybody taking an equal share of the profit out of the business, everybody working together, and so on, so on, so on. I'm not going to bore the shite out of you with that right now. But I get asked that all the time. So what do you really believe in then? Do you believe then in, the socialism? It's Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn's not a socialist. Not a socialist. I don't know anymore what the term socialist means. Like I said, I believe, it might have been Roger and me, Charlotte Binns, but I think it was more recent than that. I believe that every human being on planet Earth has the right to the things I just mentioned. I also believe that we're the only species on this planet that has to basically beg another member of our species for the right to live and for the right to eat. Don't often think about that in those kinds of terms. What other animal or what other species on planet Earth has to work, has to pay to live effectively, has to find the means through an exchange of labor for another member of our species? What other species on planet Earth has to do that in order to have the right to live and to live without fear of being evicted next week or the week after, or fear of not having enough food, right? So, look, it's a boring fucking rant, this, and it's not a very well thought out one. Like I was saying, I get asked these questions all the time. Going back to Julie's email, non-violent civil disobedience and rejecting the system and the paradigm we exist in now doesn't have to mean that it's followed by anarchy and it's followed by the strongest and the fittest survive, a kind of a Mad Max type dystopian world where, as I said earlier, the weakest of us are hiding under their beds. It doesn't have to be like that. But that's it really. I've not got a lot more to say this morning. Just want to reiterate that Paul Craig Roberts, former US Assistant Secretary to the Treasury, and Eric Karlstrom are the guests on today's Richie Allen Show. And just to remind you that in lieu of yesterday's program, I'll be doing a 90-minute program, possibly 2 hours, but at least 90 minutes on Friday around about lunchtime as well. All right, just around lunchtime, just after lunch there. Yeah, I see quite a lot of comments there. I won't read them now. I'll read them later on. In the meantime, the Richie Allen Show, the radio show, is live at 5. richieallen.co.uk, triggerwarning.tv, fabradiointernational.com, of course. Download the Cogent Radio app. It's brilliant, and it's very benign. The app is not gathering your data. It's not spying on you. Doesn't want your pictures. And there's some great content on there as well. Graham Booth and Hayden Hewitt, all the programs they make as well on Cogent Radio. So there you go. Yeah. Look, I've done a very piss poor, a very amateurish job there of describing what it is. I didn't think about it before I came on here this morning about socialism, about how we could live. It doesn't have to be about, free market capitalists always want to make it about, socialists want to come and steal the money that we made, and do you want to steal our property and all that. It doesn't have to be about that at all. We might explore this in future programs. I've often gotten into it with people like Jeff Berwick, who's an anarcho. What would you call Jeff? I suppose you'd call him. Well, he's a free market capitalist, and he's a really good guy. I disagree with him fundamentally, but he's a really good guy, Jeff. We might get into this again in the future. Right, I love you and leave you, and I'll talk to you on the live show at 5 o'clock this afternoon. In the meantime, for loads more really interesting content, stay with richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio in Manchester, triggerwarning.tv. Get on to triggerwarning.tv. We've all got YouTube channels as well. Look for the Trigger Warning YouTube channel here on YouTube as well. Alrighty, speak to you a bit later on. Thanks for staying with me. I don't know how to stop this now. How do I stop this now? I can't do it, can I? I can't. End stream. There you go.